they were looking for more than just a place to, rest their head. People were pent up and not traveling for so long that once they were finally able to, they were looking for more than just a place to, rest their heads. And I think we're just continuing to see that more and more, that people are looking for an experience, a real connection to their destination that in my opinion, I think independents really are the ones that do that best.
This episode is brought to you by Reliance Hospitality Global, where hospitality meets strategy. Whether you're developing your next hotel, need help navigating operations, or you're looking to increase profitability through our expert consulting and business process outsourcing services, Reliance has you covered. From boutique independents to full-service brands, we help owners, investors, and partners unlock value at every stage. Visit RelianceHospitality.com to learn more, and let's build something remarkable together. And welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of The Check-In with Bryan. I'm your host, Bryan Fish, and this week I am joined by someone who I have been looking forward to actually having on the podcast ever since we started planning for this season. I consider her, at this point, because our paths have crossed in multiple different ways, and I knew about her before she even knew me, I consider her to be like the Mariah Carey of the hospitality and hotel world. I know that's not in her bio, but maybe she'll add that. My guest today is Jenn Parks, Vice President of Member Development and Communication at Curator Hotel and Resort Collection, a powerhouse network of independent lifestyle hotels and resorts. Before Curator, she spent 15 years with National Geographic, leading their Unique Lodges of the World program. Did not know it existed until I met Jenn. And champion eco-luxury sustainable travel. Jenn's an expert at helping one-of-a-kind hotels thrive in a world dominated by big brands, and she's here to share how individuality and hospitality go hand in hand. So Jenn, welcome to The Check-In. I am so happy that you're here. I know that was probably not the intro you were expecting, but I really do consider you to be you were like this figure that I didn't have access to. I knew her from afar. And every people in my circle knew you, but nobody I was I can never get to her. And then we were at a BITAC, I think, together, and we were able to actually have a conversation. So I actually had the same impression of you. So that's great. You were like this enigma that I kept hearing this name over and over again. I was like, I need to know him. Yeah, it's so funny. Yes. And it's funny because the business is not very big, right? It's not. I think now that you and I know each other, I didn't just take it upon myself to just walk up to you before. I'm why was I waiting for somebody to give me an introduction? You are your career is an interesting story. Like I said, I didn't even know that National Geographic had a Unique Lodges of the World program until I met you. And I remember you told me that when we first met, that that's something you had done. And I even remember thinking, I was was she doing documentaries or what? I didn't understand. Then I went and looked it up and I was oh, it's a real thing. So you've been in this independent space for a while, but yes. Ultimately, if you had to describe your career in 3 words, what do you think those 3 words would be right now? The first I would say is purposeful. The way I've approached kind of my career trajectory is very intentional and making sure that every position and organization that I've worked for, I feel a connection to and feel that I can make an impact or do good. Another that stands out is entrepreneurial. So I've been fortunate enough to be part of 2 kind of startups, but within a larger organization, which is kind of the best of both worlds. Somehow I was lucky enough to be in 2 environments that were very entrepreneurial, that startup culture. So the first at National Geographic, of course, a storied organization that was looking to build a new business unit, basically, but in the realm of sustainable tourism, really going back to what the brand value was. And working with these visionaries across the world to bring them together and create this amazing collection of experiences around the world. And then with Curator, founded by Pebblebrook Hotel Trust, which is a publicly traded REIT, started Curator in 2020. And it's all about bringing independents together, supporting them and helping them thrive. And so I've been fortunate enough to really build that program as well. Something, new that Pebblebrook has never done before either. They are very connected in 2 ways. I would imagine that on the National Geographic side, when you started that project, did they understand obviously they had a lot of market data, right? Because what they do, like what they've done over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Did they realize what they were sitting on when you got there?
No, definitely not. No.
Okay.
I mean, National Geographic had been running expeditions for, 30 years, and they were, absolutely a leader in tour operations. They were running private jet trips, group trips, small ship with Lindblad expeditions. They had been doing all of that for a long time, but no one really understood the hotel business and all the different players in the hotel business, which has been kind of the biggest learning for me throughout both positions, really, is, sometimes there's a brand, which, we're working with independents, so we don't have that, but there's a management company. Sometimes there's an asset manager involved. Sometimes there's a third-party revenue manager, all these different layers. And getting everyone on the same page and working towards the same goal is a lot of work. It's a heavy lift. So I think when National Geographic launched the collection and the program, the vision was all there, but kind of the execution, it took a while for us to kind of ramp up and get all of those players on board.
And then you go to Pebblebrook and to start Curator.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they already had a lot of these assets in their portfolio at the time.
So the way it started was, so it was November 2020, so launching in the middle of a pandemic, which was not, by design. However, it certainly had its advantages because there was, no better of a time to launch a cost savings program, for hotel owners than during the pandemic when they were shutting hotels down. Pebblebrook had seeded the Curator collection with their, at the time, I think it was 31 independent hotels, and then had brought together some other operators that they had worked with for many years, like Davidson, Springboard, Noble House, to put their independents into Curator together. So that's kind of how it was seeded. And then since then, of course, we've been growing the collection with single owner operated properties, or, groups of, 4 or 5 hotels under one owner operator as well.
I mean, it is interesting, especially in the independent space. It's like, I feel like that's why I said that about National Geographic. Sometimes you just don't know what you're sitting on, right?
No.
And how you can bring that all together. And
yes, exactly.
Yeah, like I think it's an awesome program, and I think we'll get into a little bit later at our discussion. But I think it's it's an interesting way to attack the independent space without being well, we're going to run in at it like a Marriott or a Hilton, and we're going to put you in this collection, but you still got to do all these other things that are going to cost you money. So
exactly, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, the key, in working with independent hotels, I think, is flexibility, because you need to allow them the space and freedom to be themselves and be unique, because that's what we love about independent hotels. So how do you do that and be effective, but still offer them flexibility and not mandating different programs or services? And that's what we do, is we provide that flexibility. They're able to tap into amazing pricing and marketing exposure and all of that too.
Well, take us back, Jen. What was your first job in the hospitality space?
I was 16 at the Hampton Inn in Bow, New Hampshire, which is a very tiny town outside of Concord, New Hampshire. And I worked the night shift as a front desk agent. And I loved it so much. I loved getting to just chat with people, hear their whole life stories. As you can imagine, sometimes the night shifts, there were,
interesting characters.
Yeah. Problem solving was a big piece of that. So especially in the middle of the night where there's not a lot of staff around and, something breaks or whatever. And so I loved being able to be kind of a problem solver in that way. To be very honest, I always talk about that job as being one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. At the time, I really didn't know that there could be a career path in hospitality for me. I honestly did not know that there was like a hospitality management degree program, or else I really think I would have gravitated towards that, to be honest. And I know, University of New Hampshire has a great program. So, it's funny. I think about it and I'm like, maybe my second, education path will be doing a master's or something like that in hospitality management, just because it would be so interesting to me. And then, fast forward, how many years? I don't know, 10 years or no, 8 years, I guess, after that. Graduating college, I got an international relations degree. And yeah.
Really?
Yes. So it was so interesting. Wow. So I went to American University in DC, came from this small town. And so it was a huge kind of cultural shock and eye-opening experience for me. And it happened to be during 9/11. And I was in the international school, ended up doing my minor in peace and conflict resolution in the Middle East specifically. And so had the most interesting, eye-opening conversations and classes, and just really kind of sparked my interest in world affairs and travel and cultures and all of that. So I graduated college, went to an international trade law firm to do marketing, because basically I just needed to pay my rent so that I didn't have to move back to New Hampshire.
Like all of us out of college, it's like you just got to do something.
Exactly. But less than a year after, I just happened to see this posting at National Geographic, and they're headquartered in DC, and got the job, and then really made a career path for myself within the organization. Started out in entertainment and media marketing, and so worked on March of the Penguins when that came out. It was so amazing. I actually saw this.
That's awesome.
It was so cool, of the film in French when it came back from, I don't remember which film festival it was, but really amazing experience to be there during that time. And we launched digital distribution on iTunes and Xbox and Amazon. That was all new at the time.
I was going to say, at the time, that would have been cutting edge.
Yeah, it's really like aging me here. Yeah. And then, I took a chance and reached out to the head of travel at Expeditions at National Geographic and asked if she would meet for coffee. And I, just kind of shared how passionate I am about travel and exploration, and just, what would I need to do to kind of make that shift into the travel division out of, entertainment, still within National Geographic. And she was so kind and such an amazing mentor, and said, actually, we're launching this new, collection of eco-luxury lodges. It's going to be a membership collection. It's brand new. We're looking, for someone to do development and also like account management with the hotels. It would be a step back a little bit in your career, but, would you be interested? And I jumped at it, and it was like the best decision I've ever made. And I was able to grow within that group, and then really was kind of heading up the whole initiative. So, yeah, it was really interesting. So now that I'm in it, I'm never leaving hospitality. That's right. That's for sure.
I feel like hospitality is very much that way. I think, it's very few. I feel like it's more people that I find that have reached the levels in their career like that you and I have.
Yeah.
It's funny to me when you actually when I ask this question of them, or you're out to dinner and you ask, is so many people never intended on staying in hospitality. And a lot of the stories, my story is very similar. I started in high school just because I needed a job. Yeah. And I heard the Holiday Inn paid the most in town. So I went to go apply for the job. And much like you, I love the idea that I love the problem solving. And I would be working, second shift. And sometimes there was a manager, sometimes there wasn't. And I love the nights that there wasn't a manager, because then I got to try to figure out how to fix the problem. And then even though I went to school, my original focus was performing arts management. Yeah. And, obviously I kept working at hotels, got moved up as well. But, and I always joke about it. I feel like the performing arts management track I was on, I'm still using it to this day. I think I'm using it more these days, just because I'm doing things like the podcast and we're getting more into media. But I also think it gave me a good baseline for things I've had to deal with within the hospitality space to help myself. Yeah. So
and I can make the connection in my head on my side, but I think I've had to try to figure that out over the years. But how do you go from international business? It was business, right? Yeah. And then, I mean, National Geographic is a global organization, but like, where did you feel like the parallels were? And like, you could have gone for a hospitality degree, but what did that focus give you that you probably wouldn't have gotten if you hadn't gone for that?
I think my favorite class in college was cross-cultural communication. And something about that just like stuck with me. And I was just fascinated by languages, first of all, but also peace and conflict resolution in communication too, and kind of how to navigate difficult situations and things like that with people that may be coming from different backgrounds and have different life stories, and how you kind of make sure that you're sensitive to all of those things was really interesting to me. And I feel that National Geographic has opened the doors for that for so many years. And I had, respected their journalism, of course, and all of the media that they, cover and the way that they do it. So that's kind of what drew me to that brand.
Because they don't do anything half-assed at National Geographic.
No,
like it's fully thought out, and like they're what they put out is, I'm not like a nature lover by any means.
Yeah.
Like it's not I like nature, but I'm not like a diehard nature guy. But like National Geographic is one of those brands, like when you're in the airport and you pick up their publication or you see something online, it's like everything is always just beautifully shot, and like it'll pull you in just because of the way they tell the story.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, it's, I think people now that I work with kind of laugh at me and they call me the grammar police too. But I'm so used to all of those layers of approvals for anything that we wrote, any photography, the integrity of, the journalism and everything that we did was just so strong that I can't help myself now.
But don't stop, because I think that people forget, like a colleague of mine and I were just having this conversation last week. It's people pay attention to this. And so like potential clients pay attention to what you're doing, and they're not going to call you if like they keep constantly seeing that, you have grammatical errors in the stuff you're putting out, or like the photos are just like not right. So like I think it's a perfect trait to have. It's funny. My favorite class in that I feel like I got the most use out of, it was not even for my performing arts management degree. It was my minor was in public relations.
Oh yeah.
And the class that I think I've used the most and gotten the most out of, and I loved it just because, again, it was the problem solving, was it was a crisis management class.
Oh, totally. Yes.
And so like I've had people accuse me over the years. Like I had a manager once that was like, I just don't understand. Like, you don't seem to think that this is a big deal. And I was like, no, this is like what's going on right now is a massive deal.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is what we're doing about it. And this is what we need to do. And he goes, but you're just not like, why are you so calm? I said,
why are you not freaking out? Yeah.
And that was what I asked. I said, are you asking me why I'm not like screaming and yelling and freaking out, kind of like you are potentially doing right now?
Right.
And he goes, yes, because you need to show some urgency. And I said, I was like, I think that's where you and I are going to disagree, because if everyone's looking at me for the answer, and if I freak out, then everyone's going to freak out. So I'm like, I got to be the calm in the storm. So it's like, I always look back and I'm like, of all the classes I took, I was like, that ended up being like the one that I think helped me more than anything.
100%. Yes, for sure.
And because we're always dealing with some sort of crisis that's happened.
Sure. There's always fires to put out. And
it always helps. And to me, it also lets me decide what really is the definition of a crisis. Like, I know you think the end of the world has arrived, but it isn't.
I know.
Transitioning into your work at Curator Hotels, which is where I knew you or saw you from afar in regards to, I think it's interesting that Curator did start out of the pandemic year, because I think the pandemic did so many different things for a lot of people, right? Yeah. And I would imagine starting up a division of a company in the pandemic, number one, you were probably like, is this a good idea? Right. And my words, not yours. And then number two, is this actually going to work? But I think, like you said earlier, presenting a cost savings model in that time was probably very beneficial to the people you're talking to. But I know that, you and I have spoken before, like there's a misunderstanding in the world of what Curator is. So just for all of our viewers and listeners that just are not familiar with what Curator Hotels actually is, can you describe it for us in your own words so that we all understand across the business what Curator actually does?
So Curator is a membership collection, number one. So we are not a management company. We're not a GPO. And we are here to support all independent hotels and resorts. So in terms of criteria for joining, I think what differentiates us a lot is that we're all inclusive. So the only criteria to join our collection is to be fully independent. And we go out, we leverage the scale of our collection of almost 100 hotels and resorts across the US. We leverage that scale and we go out and negotiate preferred vendor agreements on everything that an independent needs to operate. So everything from the tech stack to credit card processing. We actually have a GPO agreement in place with Avendra, revenue management systems, property management, everything that you can think of to run an independent hotel. We have a solution for it. Our members know that it's been fully vetted, and then we've gone out and gotten better pricing just because of our scale. And then as of the past 2 or so years, we have also added marketing and exposure, booking referrals, as well as the cost savings programs too.
You sign up for it, you're fully independent. You've got resources for the members, but you're not giving them a PIP.
Correct. And everything is flexible. So we don't mandate that our members, use all of our preferred vendors or even have a minimum amount of opt-in to our programs. They can pick and choose what works best for their hotel. So, we really feel like the independent hotel spirit, we don't want to dampen that at all. And so everything that we do is flexible and what works best for their individual hotel.
Especially good independent hotels that have really executed well. They're good because they're so unique. And it's not, you can roll in with a list of brand standards. And I've seen some, we obviously won't name names here, but I've seen some independent hotels that have gone into one of the larger franchise systems, and I've seen them lose the zeal that they had and the vibe that they had before, just because they have to comply with the rules. That's what I do find awesome about Curator, is that you're saying, hey, join our program. You're going to sign up for it. We have these things available for you, but we're not going to tell you got to use everything.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
It's, I like to say we kind of present an a la carte menu. And they're all, programs and services that the hotels are using anyway. But now we're getting them at better pricing, sometimes better terms. We negotiate additional marketing benefits if it's, a revenue driving program. So all these benefits of being part of a larger collection, but we're not mandating anything. We're not telling them what to do.
Do you know the breakdown? How many of your hotels are actually owner operated as well, that they don't have a management company?
Probably 30%, I would say, are owned and operated. Not part of a larger management company. Yeah.
And those are the ones that I would say sometimes are probably harder to get entry to. Yes. But once they understand what they can get out of the value, they
get more benefits.
Become evangelists very quickly. Obviously, you're not rolling in with a list of brand standards and all of this, but is there a minimum level of entry in terms of, is there a property that isn't the perfect fit, or what do you consider to be the perfect fit for the Curator collection?
In terms of our, again, criteria or selection, you just need to be an independent. So we don't have any soft brands or anything like that. But in terms of how well Curator can work for your property, typically full service, 100 to 150 keys is typically our sweet spot, just because they're going to opt into the most amount of our programs and see the most benefit. But in the end, Curator is really an ROI endeavor. And so, we take the time within the first 6 to 8 weeks of a property joining to gather all of their contracts and invoices. We handle all of the underwriting. and present the owner with how much they can save and how much revenue they can expect to drive from joining Curator. So we really have a good sense of what their ROI is going to be, within the first couple of months. And again, in the spirit of flexibility, all of our members have, the right to terminate with only 60 days notice. So it's very flexible. The onus is on us to make sure that we're constantly providing value.
Okay, so you bring up a good point that I would love to have a slight little veer off on, just to have a little chat on. So I have gotten some, I wouldn't say heat, but I've had some of our fellow colleagues across the business. I've done a few panels the last year that were specific about like management companies or like service providers. And about the fact that like what you should be looking for. And one of the things I tell owners when I'm advising them or they are asking me, and I've said it publicly, so this is not breaking news, but I'm sure someone's going to email me after this and say, I can't believe you're saying this, is I think gone are the days that we realistically, if it's one of these, member programs like Curator to join, if it's a management company, if it's a sales support service, if it's any of those things that we use at the hotel, especially in the tech stack, like, is it really necessary to sign a contract where it's multi-year? And in order to get out of it, you basically need to give up, a pint of blood, your first child, and maybe your house to do it. Because what you just said is the onus is on you after that 60 days. And I fully believe, and I tell people, we typically in, the rest of my job, we'll put a contract out. There's a minimum, we have a minimum 90 days on a lot of things just to get us set up.
Yeah, exactly.
But after that, there's a notice period that's reasonable because it's a two-way street too, right? You may not want that hotel to maintain in the portfolio, or I might not want them to stay the client, but maybe they don't see it and they want to be able to get out, and it's a much better relationship at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I feel like, especially in the independent space, that has to be a relief when you talk to them and say, hey, this is what it is. Because in their minds, I'm sure they're thinking, well, they obviously are going to have to do something to help us out because they have to prove their worth.
Exactly.
And I think that's so important today in the life of subscriptions, right? Because your Netflix, everything we do in our personal life is a subscription these days.
Yes.
So why should it not be the same in business right now? What's your thought on that? Because like I said, I've gotten heat because I've had people come up to me at conferences after panels and say I can't believe you would tell people that, but we have to have them sign a 3-year contract because otherwise we're going to constantly be replacing clients. And I'm like, then I think you need to look inside.
Correct. Exactly. It's we're not in the business of holding people hostage, right?
Right. Yeah.
But honestly, I feel the, long term, I totally agree with you that that's a thing of the past. It's kind of a lazy approach because you're locked in and then you don't really have to work for it. Right. Whereas if there's flexibility there, it makes sure that both sides are, it's an active endeavor on both sides. So, we can keep building our portfolio of programs and providing more and more value. And we also need someone from the hotel who is going to be kind of our point person, who is going to engage with us on a monthly basis for a half hour or whatever that is. And so it's really more of a partnership in that way, I think, much more so than just
sign the line and, let it ride, basically.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I feel like our business is eventually going to understand that fully. I think a lot of the new players from the service provider perspective, they've started to realize that, even when we're I'm sure when you're evaluating potential contracts, I'll flat out tell a vendor right now, up front, it's we got to have, there has to be a 90-day out at minimum. Yes. And I will not pay an early termination fee or anything.
Always.
And it's funny, the legacy companies always push back and say, well, but we just can't do that.
Yeah.
And if you ask them why, they're just well, we just don't do it. But then you go to the guys that are out there, developing new products that we both know a lot of the newer stuff can do a lot more than the legacy products.
Sure.
They're like, oh, it's a 30-day, it's a 30-day rolling thing. So you just renew every 30 days. And then if you want to cancel, you just cancel. And that guy has to work to keep my business.
Yes, exactly.
And if something goes wrong, that guy is going to take care of it right away because
that's right.
He knows I could cancel next month. But obviously the independent space has been growing more in the last, I feel like in my personal, this isn't an actual statistic. You probably actually know the statistic off the top of your head, but I feel like in the last decade, independent hotels have really started to take off. Yes. And I think that they were always prevalent globally outside of North America.
Yes.
But North America, especially the United States, has started to really embrace them. And in some cases, they've joined the larger flags, because the larger flags obviously recognize that they're all these independent hotels, so they're getting them into their soft brand collections. But how do you see the independent segment ultimately, at the end of the day, competing with and complementing those larger franchise systems? Like, do you see, and do you think that the owners that end up signing with those franchisers maybe are selling themselves short?
Listen, I think there's room for everyone. There's a segment of travelers that are always just going to stay at where they can use points. And there's no way around that. We all know people like that, right? They're like, I would only stay at.
And I guess with that said, I should preface that with, if I'm traveling for business, I will always be staying at, it's always going to be either Hyatt or Marriott or Hilton because of the points. But I definitely would go to an independent for my own personal travel.
Exactly. So even just, looking at you as a case study, you're going to have both, right? So I don't think that that there isn't room for both brands and independents. I think there is this growing segment of travelers. And I think, really it really kind of sped up and grew coming out of COVID too. I think that people were pent up and not traveling for so long that once they were finally able to, they were looking for more than just a place to, rest their heads. And I think we're just continuing to see that more and more, that people are looking for an experience, a real connection to their destination that in my opinion, I think independents really are the ones that do that best, because I know for myself, when I stay at, a really cool boutique hotel in, a certain city and the bath amenities, I'm like, I haven't, heard of this brand before. And then I look on the back and it's made locally, and there's, lavender from a farm nearby or honey from, it's it's interesting, right? And it tells part of the story, and it makes you feel more connected to the destination. So it's 100%. Things like that. It's art, and, sometimes they'll have activations and common areas and things like that, where you can, learn about the artist that provided all of the art for the hotel, and everything is different in every room. And it just, those types of touches, I think, are really what keep people coming back to those hotels and make them memorable, that you just don't have at a branded property. So I think your question about, our owners selling themselves short by going to a brand, I think there are scenarios and, certain destinations, and especially in some urban areas, where those hotels really need the brands for distribution. And that's what we hear sometimes when, an independent then decides to flag, and that's kind of their only solution at that point. And so sometimes I think it's a necessity, but if it's an owner that, wants to stay independent and really believes in the independent spirit and all of that, I think Curator is really that alternative for them that really didn't exist before. So our goal is that we're giving them the benefits of joining, a big brand, but with that flexibility and ability to really stay unique, but be able to, have those cost savings and exposure as well.
I feel like the difference, and then I'm totally going to age myself now because I'm just doing the math in my head. I'm like, that was 20 years ago, is we would dig into those arrivals every day. And we didn't even have the systems that we have now to be able to actually track these guests and track the trends. Right. But we would be going through and coming up with all sorts of stuff for loyalty or whatever, and handwriting notes and doing all these things. And then when the kids came, the guest comes in with kids, we would send games or cookies and milk and stuff to the room, stuff like that. Yeah. And I feel like there are still some large brands that below luxury even luxury at the larger brands, I don't feel like you get it as much anymore. But I feel like all those touches that we used to have on a hospitality basis have kind of gone away because we've become like the front office, which, you know, is where I grew up in the hotels, used to be like the heart of the house where we like were configuring how the entire stay was going to go.
Right.
And the one thing I've noticed a lot of staying in independent hotels the last couple of years more and more is that's the type of service, those independent hotels that are successful and are doing well and that are rated well. Those are the things that they're doing that if I'm going to go on a vacation, especially, and I don't have children, but if I did, like that's where I would want to go because I know they're going to give me the actual experience as opposed to just, you know, whereas for like business, you know, I mentioned those other hotel brands before. Yeah. A lot of it for me is, you know, a lot of times when I'm on the road, it's because we're doing some sort of media project and we have to have like the internet's got to work really well. There's all those like things we need to know are in place. But I also know the service is not as good as it could be. And I'm also looking at the independent space thinking there's some independents out there that they just like they truly deliver that guest experience.
Yes.
And it's amazing. One thing that we encounter a lot, Jen, is when a hotel is branded and their license is expiring, they want to go independent. And it'll be in like usually a metro market, someplace where there's demand. So going independent doesn't necessarily not make sense.
Right.
But you'll go to them and you'll present a package and a plan of, okay, well, this is what we need to do in order to make you independent. And when they get that plan, the first thing they usually complain about is, oh my God, it's going to cost $80,000 for somebody to make my logo and then come up with a story of the hotel. And then they're like, well, we don't need a story. It's just a hotel. And the funny thing is if the whole presentation that we give doesn't really focus on like just creating the logo, but they kind of leave thinking that that's what it is. So like, I'm sure you have none of these at Curator, but have you come across any hotel owners that just don't really understand at the end of the day, like that the brand is really more than just the name on the building?
For sure. I mean, it's what differentiates the property, right, from everything else. Right. I mean, especially if you're talking about in a metro area where there's so many choices. Yeah, the storytelling, the brand vision, that's everything. You know, at Curator, we typically get involved after that process. Speaking to what you were saying, you know, we do have some owners that have never owned or operated an independent hotel before. And so they don't necessarily realize all of the different things that need to happen and systems that they need to plug into and all of that. And so, you know, at Curator, we offer this platform of all of these solutions. It's, you know, a menu. We operate on a Salesforce CRM called My Curator, where they can literally go in and see every solution under, you know, revenue management, property management, credit card processing, you know, CRS, booking engine, everything you can think of. And they can see all of these vetted solutions, the pricing, everything. And so I think our solution makes it really easy for an owner who's never done this before. And we do have a couple of those, or we have some that, you know, are not hoteliers by trade at all. This is like a passion project that they just decided to try. And so if you're not working with a management company and you're not working with a brand, you know, they're sometimes a little lost as to where to start. And I think, you know, we kind of provide that playbook for them. And so, you know, I think the educating piece is a big part of the value there too.
Because I've seen it so many times where it's like they just forget that it's a story, and I have to remind them. I'm like, you know, Holiday Inn has a story. Marriott has a story. All these brands, they have a story. Even outside of hospitality, you know, Apple tells a story. Like there's always a story. It's not just the logo and the name.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now you want to get to the point where you've been around for so long that you don't need a story anymore because nobody needs to know the story. But you know, it's important in setting the space. It also goes into the design. Yeah. You know, that's another thing I'd love to hear from your perspective is, you know, how important is it? Do you feel that interior design of the hotel really plays into these independent hotels that are on the market these days?
I mean, it's hugely important. I mean, that's how you bring the destination inside, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, just all the like thinking of some of my favorite properties in Austin. They had like this super cool gift shop that a lot of times, like a hotel gift shop, you're like, meh, it's, very generic stuff, like whatever. And every piece, you could just feel how curated every single thing was in this shop. And there were so many people always in this gift shop. And they had, handmade like cowboy hats and boots and, candles sourced locally, but just like really cool little touches and items that you couldn't get anywhere else, paired with all these amazing art pieces that were all throughout the hotel. And, with little placards under all of them of like where this artist is from and what this painting really tells the story of and all of that. And it just brings in the city right into the hotel. I think it's hugely important. It
exposes the guest to something that they don't know about. And then you're able to help that local business too at the same time.
Exactly. Right.
So it's, it makes everything work together and, makes the hotel part of the community. So where do you see the hotel space in the independent segment? Where do you see it going over the next 10 years? Maybe?
I mean, I would love to see continued growth and penetration of independent hotels. I think, unfortunately, just in the environment that we're in right now, I mean, it's so sad. I feel like every day there's some announcement of cool independent brand that's, being acquired by one of the big brands. So, unfortunately, the trend is not necessarily what I would aspire for. There is demand for these type of hotels. Like there are travelers out there that are looking for these types of experiences, and it's continuing to innovate how we find those travelers and how we market to them, I think is hugely important to contribute to the growth of the independent market for sure.
No, yeah, I definitely think it's not something to be slept on by anybody.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting to see how the large companies, the amount of M&A that is been happening. And because I'll give you an example. I just last week stayed in a Sonder for the first time, which is now part of Marriott. It's just now part of Marriott. It was phenomenal. I loved it. Now I will say it's the first time in a long time that I've stayed at a Marriott property and somebody's actually handwritten a note and left it in my room for thanking me for my status. And in my thought process was interesting. This was essentially like a corporate housing system, I think, before. Now you're taking like regular hotel guests essentially, and you wrote a note, and I know it wasn't the first time they've done it because they had actual stationery that they were doing. Yeah. I was like, it's interesting. So in my back of my mind, I was like, I'm gonna pay attention to this because I'm wondering how long this stays, because I'm hoping it's not something that gets watered down, because I do feel like that's what happens is when these brands merge and they get acquired by other companies, it's those special touches that they used to do all kind of start to go away because there's such a big list of other things they have to do. And, I just think I don't know what the breakdown is, but I think, especially in the luxury segment on the independent side, it's so huge because it's those luxury guests. It's those guests that do have the money to continue spending when there's an economic downturn, or that they do expect that personalized service. And that's where I do think that the independents can win over guests from the brands, because that specific demographic, they will go to a non-branded hotel if it means they're going to get the service, because the service for them is number one. So it's service and exclusivity, I feel like, too. Like, feeling like there are things that they're going to get from that experience that they could never get anywhere else. Like, really, they don't want to be a number. Yeah, they don't want to be a number. So awesome. Exactly. Well, Jen, I am so happy that you were able to join me today. Me too. I hope this isn't the last time. We're definitely going to have to do something else together in the future. I have a great idea for a roundtable discussion, which we will discuss later. Now, if anyone wants to find you specifically and learn more about Curator Hotels, where should we send them? Where do they go to find out more? It is J Parks at curatorhotelsandresorts.com.
is the best email address. Reach out to me. Would love to schedule time to talk and give a proper introduction to what we do and how we create value for independent hotels.
And I love that you gave your email address. And she does answer her emails, everyone. So I will tell you, she very much does pay attention to her inbox. So awesome. Well, Jenn, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I think I hope everyone that was listening, and the ones of you that were watching us, I hope you were watching us. We look great. Have a better understanding now of curators. So if I come across you at a conference, I don't want to hear, oh, I think they're just another one of XYZ. No, you know what they are now. So
That's right.
Definitely check them out. And if you're working at one of the brands, check them out now. You might learn something. So,
That's right.
Yeah. So awesome, guys. We will be back on Friday with our next episode of our Friday checkouts. And I will leave you, Jenn, to get back to doing back to your day job. And I can't wait to see you in person here, hopefully in a few weeks. So
exactly. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Take care.
Thanks.
This episode of Check-In with Bryan is a production of RH Media Productions, hosted by Bryan Fish, executive producer Tyler Alexander, marketing support provided by Sunny Timbler. Thanks for checking in. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss this week's Friday checkout coming this Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Reliance Hospitality Global Incorporated or any of its affiliates, partners, or subsidiaries. All content is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice.